What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of my Fountain Pens 101 series. In this video, I'm going to discuss how you fill different types of fountain pens. Here I have some relatively common methods of filling a fountain pen. These two on top are cartridge converter pens. This is a Pilot Custom 74. This is a Lamy Safari. Here I have a TWSBI VAC 700. This is a vacuum filling pen. I believe the Pilot 823 is also a vacuum filler. Here I have a Parker 21, and this is a vacuumatic filler, a vac sac filler, I guess you could call it. And then I have a Noodler's Nib Creeper pen, and this is a piston fill pen. Most common pens, in my opinion, that you're going to find will be piston filled pens and cartridge converter pens. Generally, with more, with inexpensive pens, you're gonna find them. They are mostly cartridge converter pens. Some of the nicer pens, the pens that go up, in the 100+ range, not always the case. TWSBI pens, you get piston filled pens for under 100, or there's a $14 pen that's a piston filled pens. But generally, nicer pens like, say, my Lamy 2000, this is a piston filler as well. A lot of Parker, the Parker 21 and the 51 line, they're pretty popular in terms of writers and collectors. And these are vacuum sac filled pens. And these vacuum pens, not as common. I don't really know that many pen companies that are actually using this. I just happen to have a VAC 700, so I figured I'd show you guys. Now, we'll just go with a cartridge converter. This is a converter. Generally, with a lot of cartridge converter pens, they come pre-filled with a wax seal. Do I have one handy? I don't have any Lamy converters cartridges anymore. Oh. Hang on. Let's see. Here we go. I have a Platinum Preppy here. This is also a cartridge converter pen. This is an ink cartridge. They're meant to be disposable. You can see here this one actually has a metal ball on there that keeps the ink in place. A lot of them have like plastic or wax seals over it, and what happens is when you push the converter into the pen, there's a feeding nipple there that pushes this marble out of the way, or punctures the wax seal there and allows ink to flow from the cartridge into the feed and to the nib. You can reuse these cartridges if you want to with an ink syringe like this. Basically, you just feed in ink into the syringe and refill the cartridge and reuse it. But most cartridge converter pens, like I say, you can buy converters for them. This is the Lamy converter. This almost works like a piston fill, except it's not exactly part of the pen. The difference between this and a piston fill is a piston fill will generally hold more ink, and it's actually part of the pen itself, versus this is completely separate. And these just kind of just pressure fit in place. Some converters do screw in place, and that's how you would fill them. Like I said, with a piston fill, it's very similar to the cartridge, the converter, in that when you untwist this piston knob, there's actually ink in here, so I have to be careful. It moves this plunger inside up and down, and that's what creates suction to allow you to suck ink up from the breather hole in the feed into your ink section of your pen. When you unscrew the piston knob, it brings the plunger down, and then when you screw the piston knob tight again, it brings the plunger back up, and with the vacuum it sucks ink into the pen, into the ink reservoir. With a vacuum sac pen, like this, kind of the same principle. There is a bar here that you squeeze. It compresses this vacuum sac. Oh, sorry, I bumped the tripod. This is just I guess it's a rubber sac here that's kind of shellacked in place or whatever, or glued in place here. And when you press the sac, it forces air out, and then you would dip the pen into the ink, release that pressure bar here, and it would suck ink into the pen. And great. Kind of don't want to waste a lot of time, so I'll just put that bar back later. With this vacuum fill pen, you would unscrew this knob here. You would pull this, and you can actually see there's a rubber gasket in there. You would pull this all the way up, and then as you push this plunger back down, it actually creates a negative pressure inside the ink reservoir. And once it reaches this flared out part, that pressure stabilizes in the pen because it no longer has a complete vacuum there, and it forces ink through the feed into the ink reservoir. I'm not actually going to do it now with this pen because I actually have ink in here. In terms of filling pens, they're all basically the same, other than with cartridge pens, with converters, with any of the the piston fillers, any of the vacuum fillers. It's very simple. You basically just dip the nib and the feed of the pen until the breather hold is submerged in ink, and then you would use whatever mechanism is there to actually suck ink up through the nib and the feed and into the ink reservoir. I'm actually going to fill that Lamy Safari. I have a bottle of Diamine Turquoise. I actually have to fill this pen to write with my ink journal anyway, so I might as well just demo it really quickly. You can see here the piston is moving up and down as I twist the piston knob. Like I said, a piston filled pen basically works the same way, except it's actually integrated into the pen instead of being a separate component. So what I'm going to do to fill this, very simple. Twist it down so the piston goes down all the way. I'm going to actually get an ink cloth ready to clean up the pen. And then you can see here on this pen, that's the breather hole. That's the part that has to be submerged into the ink in order for you to actually pull ink up into the converter. If you just submerge the nib, due to capillary action, you may pull some ink into the converter, but not really enough to really get you a good fill. So you would submerge it. You can submerge it all the way if you want, but that's just more of the section that you have to clean off. You pull you screw the piston until the plunger is pulled up. You kind of wipe off the excess ink, and there you go. This pen is basically filled. You can see there's actually an air bubble in there. But what happened is, and I didn't wipe this pen off before I started holding the section. What happened with that is, because I just, this pen is completely clean, there's no actual ink in the feed itself. That means there is air in the feed. And when I first draw the plunger back up, it's pulling that air that's in the feed as an air bubble into the converter. And then from there, it starts filling up the feed with ink. But that's why you're left with the air bubble in the converter. If you want, you can always just, work the plunger mechanism up and down several times in the ink bottle. That'll get rid of any air bubbles that you may have from the feed, and you'll get a full fill. In this case, I'm not going to do that because I don't necessarily need a full fill on this pen right now. It's just more for my ink journal. I'm not going to be doing extended writing with this. I'm probably just going to end up transferring the ink to a different pen and then cleaning it out again and getting it ready for the next ink. But basically at this point, I would just assemble the pen back together, and this pen is basically ready to write. Which with cartridge pens, sometimes when you first push the cartridge in, like I said, because you're not feeding ink through the feed, there is air in there, and you'll have to wait for the ink to settle, and kind of keep it upside down, let gravity do its thing, let the ink settle so it flows freely into the feed and the nib, so you can finally write with it. In this case, let's see, there's a piece of paper. Because I fed it, I filled this pen through the feed and the nib through the breather hold. This pen basically writes right away. So yeah, filling pens are relatively simple. Generally when you buy a pen, it will come with directions on how you fill it. If not, you can always go on forums, go on YouTube and find videos on how to fill different pens. But the general concept's the same. In order to fill it, you can just dip the nib and the feed into the ink and use whatever method, whether it be piston, vacuum, or vac-sac, and just pull ink up into the ink reservoir. Another option with converters is you can actually just dip the converter into your ink bottle and just fill it up that way and then push it in. But like I said, that'll act almost like a cartridge, and you'll have to let the ink settle first before you can write. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.